We may have lost the stream for just a second there, but hopefully we're back by now, guys. So we are looking at a pretty fast start for Grizzly. Nothing especially aggressive. With this deck, you really want those Champion of Chaoses on curve. Even with the most recent nerf, they're really, really powerful if you can get them out at the right time. And in the meantime, Marius is just setting up, trying to get to the point where he can safely protect that Staff of Stories.
Which is not going to be a lot easier because it got hit by both Inspires, so it's at 2/6. So it can even take a hit from like an Umber Reaper, Tomb Trigger, and still be fine. The Steward of the Past is going to come down. So Marius actually has the option of just playing the Staff. It can take 3. 3 isn't 6. Although it actually doesn't have second Primal. Excuse me, he actually can't play that. So he's just going to play a power. Hopefully, baiting Grizzly to extend further his Harsh Rule. Grizzly will oblige.
Yeah, getting that Umbran Reaper out this early is definitely a big advantage for him. It's tricky to hit it on 5 now, just because of the triple Shadow influence, but of course, this deck is pretty good at getting out reliable power sources, so it still manages to stick it, and at this point, Marius is probably in a bit of trouble unless he ends up Harsh Ruling, which you don't really want to throw those too early, but against Grizzly's hand, it's clearly the correct option.
I think he should Harsh Rule here as well, and he's going to opt for the Elian's Favor into Vanquish, which makes it so he takes 0 damage from the Umbran Reaper. He's just going to take 3 from the Steward, which is fine here. The Steward doesn't really present much of a clock. It just is 3 damage. The Staff can endure a hit from it. Iron Thor can trade with it. He can Harsh Rule. He has a lot of options to deal with it. So he just wants to not take the damage from the Entomb Trigger. I definitely understand that.
Yeah. Anything that you can do to preserve your life total against the Stonescar decks that run basically larger threats like Umbran Reaper and Flame Blast can be really, really effective. I'm actually not sure. Is there a Flame Blast in this version? No, there is not.
There's no burn. It is all like a very removal-heavy build of Stonescar.
The pressure-based Stonescar decks really care about your health total, and that's often where they get a lot of their value out, by gaining some health advantage with cards like Infernal Tyrant and Umbran Reaper, and then just basically wearing you down through attrition. It doesn't matter so much if they run out of cards, as long as they have the ability to just do that finishing blow. So,
and we'll see here if Marius decides to play the Staff on what he thinks is his empty board, but Grizzly just top decked a Cabal Countess. So if Marius plays the Staff of Stories, Grizzly will just be able to flash in Cabal Countess, Ultimate Cabal Countess, attack it down. He doesn't even need to Furnace Mage. He may just Furnace Mage anyway, but he doesn't need to.
Proposition here. Like, he does get the 2 damage at least, but no card draw. Essentially 6 health gained against the Cabal Countess, but there wasn't really an answer for it. So I guess it's fine here.
Yeah, and I guess saving the First Mage I like, because you can kill the Cabal Countess essentially kills the Staff, which is an attack normally wouldn't do. And so you still have the Furnace Mage to destroy an Eye of Winter, another Staff of Stories, Perfrost, whatever, and the Cabal Countess is still around.
Marius playing Ironthorn here. He's going to take 4 from this, or take the full 6 from this, but he does get to pick out a weapon of his choice. Auric Runehammer is not a terrible decision. He could have risen for Auric Runehammer at this point, so he must have something else in mind.
There's also an argument for rising for Icaria, just to start turning the corner, get the tax in. You could double block with the Iron. You could like jump with this Iron Thorn, or take 6 with this Iron Thorn, double block with the other Iron Thorn next turn or something. It's kind of like hard to play the Icaria. It's certainly very risky, but it does start the Warcry 5 going. If you draw a weapon or a creature big enough to block the 6/1 quick draw, then it immediately pays off. It's just how often you're going to draw a creature immediately.
He does pick up the Auric Runehammer. Certainly, this is a little bit rough here. At this point, he's now at 8, which is dangerous territory, but as long as he can get control of the game and make sure that the board is just not full of useful threats, he should be okay. Again, there aren't any Flame Blasts in this deck, so it's going to take 2 Umbran Reapers or some other form of direct damage to push through these 2 Iron Thorns. So Grizzly needs to find a couple of answers that will actually get through this kind of meat wall that Marius is presenting.
Yeah, Champion of Chaos helps to some degree, although he has to play First Mage first, because if he plays a Champion of Chaos, it'll just get attacked down by the Auric Runehammer.
It's discounted by Quarry, so he's got.
Oh, you're right. Actually, yeah, I didn't notice the Quarry discount. He can do both, which I imagine we see here. If Marius top 6 of power, though, he gets to activate the Martial Ironthorn. So I guess that is giving Grizzly some pause.
Yeah, that whole 3 power off of a single option is really rough, but I don't think there's a better line of play for Grizzly here. The Vara's Favor and Suffocate are both dead in hand, and it's essentially top deck versus top deck at this point.
The Vara's Favor actually can deal with the Orc Runehammer. I was not used to Orc Runehammers only having one armor this late in the game. I'm used to armor smiths and stuff, so that is an alternative to this Furnace Mage. It costs less mana. It's probably not doing anything else. Like, I don't know what else that Vara's Favor is doing other than trading with this Orc Runehammer. So we'll see what he wants to do.
It's a tough call. The main reason to play the Furnace Mage here is just to develop the board and get a little bit more pressure, but it's a tough call either way.
It's so disgusting if they rip the power and they play with you and crack back for 11 and you're just on such a huge clock. Probably just lose the game on the spot, but the power was not drawn. Grizzly has 2 cards on board. He can double block like the 5/5 Iron Thorn, but the 6/6 Iron Thorn is probably has pretty good attacks here.
Yeah, Grizzly's in a lot of trouble here. Marius not only has like a commanding board presence that allows him to keep the board locked down, but he's also in a place where there are probably 30 to 40 available top decks that'll win him the game, not the least of which are just power. But cards like Harsh Rule, anything that allows him to stabilize any sort of weapon, there are a lot of things here that can really get Marius ahead. And with the amount of damage he's already pressing, it's going to be tricky.
He could alpha here, or he's just going to attack with the 4/3. I think it's. I mean, there's like cost and benefit, but attacking with the first mage here allows you to kill the Iron Thorn if the Iron Thorn blocks with the Vara's Favor. So that was the plan here.
Because it does prevent the other Iron Thorn from getting that ultimate off, which will mean that he'll be able to pressure for damage later. If he can draw something to get rid of this Iron Thorn, it goes back to top deck versus top deck, which is he's still behind at the moment, but there's the potential to actually get to that extra bit of damage with the Champion of Chaos.
There's the corner getting turned immediately with the Kari off the top. That's going to put Grizzly under a huge amount of pressure. There was a window there last turn where if he drew removals with the Iron Thorn, he puts Marius under a lot of pressure. 8, but now it's just you can't do anything.
Yep, just a little too much going on there. Grizzly's deck, the end of it, it's very difficult to deal with the sort of extremely late game plan of Ikaria. You do have to figure out some way to push that extra amount of damage because you're always going to get your opponent down pretty low. It's just finding that opening, finding either a mistake or getting enough removal to just create an opening that really gets you that extra bit of damage and gets you through.
Yeah, and that's the cost that Grizzly's paying with his build of Stone Scar. He has eschewed a lot of the burn for cards that are just removal, things like Infernal Tyrant. They're better at rumbling with creatures, Statuary Maiden. All of these creatures that are not great at dealing damage to the opponent, they're good at making you live. So in a matchup like this, where Karia Blue does not have a lot of targets for that removal, and they're kind of better at that game plan, Grizzly's kind of already just at a fundamental disadvantage. But we'll see if he can remedy that going into sideboard.
Mm-hmm. He has a lot of different options. He's cutting the Suffocates and one of the Annihilates. So cutting a lot of removal in order to perhaps generate a bit more pressure and see what it is that he can do with that. This deck is running 4 Stewards and like 3 or 4 Statuary Maidens, which are not typically extremely strong cards against Armory. So I'm curious to see how many of those go away and what he ends up doing with those.
I think it's mainly just the Suffocates and like some number of the Annihilates coming out. I don't know how much you want to side out creatures. Statuary Maiden, or at least Steward of the Past, is still pretty good against baseline Orc Runehammers, sort of Karia, other weapons like that that could trade with Iron Thorns, or at least prevent Iron Thorns from blocking. So they do have some use that can attack, that can block.
He's picking up Subverts and Ruins here. There's a possibility that Sabotages can come in as well. Those are always useful if you run into a Rise to the Challenge on like a standard turn 4, but sometimes they can be a little bit tricky. Subvert, of course, is a fun card against Armory. It's really effective because Armory tends to not play a lot of tempo and tends to very much value those cards in its hand. If you can pull a particularly good card like Ikaria out, then you can easily win a game that way. Pretty small sideboard from Grizzly. Very, very minor changes here, but we'll see how they do. And with the Ruins in, perhaps you'll have a better chance of getting through for the next game.
Yeah, the Ruins will certainly be good installation from the Orc Runehammer. And on the side of Marius, we see the Mistveil Drake come in, Sword of the Sky King. A lot of the top-end cards, they also have a Celestial Omen, Rain Frogs, Eye of Winter, Backlash. They're already pretty well situated for this matchup in the main board, so he didn't do a lot of sideboarding. But we will see as how things play out. As we move here into game 2, this is match point for Marius.
I'm a little concerned here. Of course, like if without he's cut 1 Annihilate, and he had issues with those Iron Thorns last game. So I'm curious as to how he's planning to deal with them this game. We certainly have Cabal Countess available on 3, which is always good to have a little bit of pressure early here. Anytime that you can get some on the decks that are just a little bit slower, that's pretty relevant here.
Yeah, and Rizzo has a pretty good draw here. He gets to Quarry, set up his draw. He gets an Argent Instigator, so he actually has choice next turn of which creature he wants to apply pressure with. Meanwhile, Marius is kind of just like spinning his tires. Next turn, he could rise to the challenge, which also doesn't affect the board. And then maybe he'll play an Iron Thorn naked, but it wouldn't be able to block this Cabal Countess that's coming down potentially, although Grizzly does opt for the Argent Instigator.
Yeah, it's not a bad decision. He can Dark Return and Cabal Countess next turn, or he can try his luck with a Subvert since there's been a Rise to the challenge. I'm guessing that the Rise has, in fact... Oh, no, the Rise has picked up Ikaria. That's a fun, greedy play.
Well, he does have the 2 Iron Thorns, so this Ikaria is coming down on turn 6, likely. Or it's coming down next turn if this Iron Thorn does not die. So I like that aggressive play from Marius. Ikaria is incredibly strong in this matchup. There are very few things that deal with it, like Umbran Reaper has to trade. So if he gets it down early, he could just win from that, just doing that.
This is a really interesting difference between the Armory deck and the Big Combre deck. With a Big Combre deck, you typically never play Iron Thorn on 5 because it's not about developing the Iron Thorn so much as it is about developing the power. Here, Marius is developing the Iron Thorn first because it's a good tempo play and also because it jumps him to 7 with Ikaria. If he'd waited until the next turn, then he might have guaranteed himself extra power, but he doesn't need 8 power. So it's a pretty cool play, and it does force Grizzly to harsh rule his own Instigator.
Yeah, we see them for Grizzly forcing that awkward play, and now Marius was play Iron Thorn. Ikaria is coming down next turn. He can't play this Rise to the Challenge, but that's okay. He's now forced Grizzly into a spot where it's like, okay, I'm going to play this Ikaria next turn. What are you going to do? Although this Subvert off the top might blow things up, and it does. It takes the Ikaria.
Oh, yep. There we go. That's definitely what you want to see. Oh, I'm a little surprised he's even using the Dark Return at this point.
Yeah, you want to get Ikaria back.
That's the real value play. I think Grizzly may have turned this game with that Subvert. This is going to be pretty hard for Marius to recover from. It's possible that if he pulls the right weapons and manages to keep Iron Thorn available for just general removal, he'll be okay. But Ikaria and Umbran Reaper represent something like 13 just guaranteed damage. So he's got a lot to deal with at the moment.
Yeah, and it is worth noting that Grizzly's build is atypical of Stone Scar decks. So if Marius is able to get to a point where he can not take damage from creatures, Grizzly's only reaches Torch and an Umbran Reaper and Tomb Trigger potentially. So
yeah, it's true. Like Marius just basically has to deal with Ikaria and the Umbran Reaper, and if he can actually stabilize the board against these big threats, he'll be in better shape. A Rise to the Challenge for an Auric Runehammer would be pretty much the best thing for him here, but a Sword of the Sky King will certainly help out.
And all the while, this Iron Thorn is building up to ultimate. It's only 2 turns away, so that could help Marius clear up the board a lot. This Sword of the Sky King is still going to check another creature. I could trade with that 8/8 Argentport Instigator that Grizzly is now drawn. So Marius is on the back foot, but he definitely has ways to claw back in this game.
Yeah, I think Infernal Tyrant looks like an interesting play here just because you get that lifesteal swing, you get to actually deal with the... Like, whatever he plays is going to get killed by the Sword of the Sky King, but as a result, he will actually be able to press a bunch of damage here. So it's a question of whether or not he wants to wait it out and try and get past that Island's Favor Aegis before playing Umbran Reaper, or whether he wants to play the Umbran Reaper first and try to press like that amount of extra damage with a creature that's very forward-facing.
I'm a fan of having a double spell turn here. There's a couple ways you can do it. You could play Umbran Reaper plus Argentport Instigator. You can play Cabal Countess plus Argentport. I think playing 2 threats, especially if one of them has Flash, is a great way to go this turn. It just is so much for Marius to deal with. But yeah. Grizzly decides to go with the Infernal Tyrant, just the bigger card, I guess.
Infernal Tyrant's a pretty good setup, and of course, Cabal Countess can work to divert a weapon, which is always nice. He could have played Argenport and then played the ambush Cabal Countess, but I like this particular line of play as well because Infernal Tyrant is getting a pretty decent amount of use in smashing that Sword of the Sky King and forcing the lifesteal to go off. So Grizzly actually has a significant health advantage as a result of that.
Yeah, Marius certainly is like very, very far away from turning the corner, and that is only if they manage to deal with this board. Which, if they do have the power, they can just use the ultimate Iron Thorn here, kill both these things. Although we do know about the Cabal Countess, and if Marius is going to get aggressive here, which he does, this Cabal Countess is going to crack back for 6.
That's a pretty good deal. It's unfortunate that the Instigators never got the chance to pop the Aegis on Marius because at this point, Grizzly can press 6 damage and no more than that. I think he definitely wants to press that 6 damage, but he's not going to have a play afterwards. So if Marius manages to deal with this particular card, he's got a chance of coming back into this.
And I do like that Grizzly decided to not ultimate there. He the 4 mana precludes him from playing another creature, like having the access to second threat. And we do see a Rise to Challenge from Marius. This can get a bunch of stuff that could possibly get him out of the situation. An Orc Runehammer is decent, starting forward progress. You can deal with the Cabal Countess, then you trade your Iron Thorn with the Stir of the Past. You can deal with the next thing. You can get an Ikaria, try to start turning the corner. He has a bunch of options here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Orc Runehammer actually saves him here. He needs it to deal with the Umbran Reaper, and if he's most likely to use it against one of these units just so that he can stabilize. But it's possible that he'll be smart and save it. At that point, however, the Cabal Countess is a 6/1 with Quick Draw, and that's going to kill him too. So he really needs to find a different answer here, and I'm not sure there's one in his deck.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Throne Warden is like. All of his options are just a little awkward. He has a bunch of marginal stuff that can help him, but he probably can't beat the board. So, like, I do think Orc Runehammer is the best option, but if he plays it now, he's really cold to a follow-up creature. If he holds it, he just has to trump the Iron Thorn. We do see the Runehammer killing the Ball Countess, which I do think is the best available play, but the best available play still puts him in a pretty bad spot.
Yeah, funnily enough, like the reason that this Runehammer is particularly good is that it does gain him 1 health against the Umbran Reaper, which is just enough to stabilize. So perhaps we'll see Marius get out of here if he can find a way to kill the Umbran Reaper with a removal spell.
And there it is. There's Permafrost.
Ooh, Permafrost is a really good one. He still has to eventually deal with the Umbran Reaper, but at the moment he can safely deal from a position of 6 health, and that's not bad for him at all. Like, being at 4 right now is not too terrible. Grizzly can always find a Torture of Vara's favor and kill the Umbran Reaper, but
the Ruin does deal with the Permafrost.
Ruin.
Yeah, that will be lethal. Bring it to 1-1 in round 1 here. So yeah, that was a really close match. Grizzly was able to just had a very creature dense draw and was able to overpower Marius. Marius just didn't have the answers. That's one of the downsides of Ikaria Blue is they're kind of split between reactivity and proactivity, and sometimes their limited amount of reactivity does not line up against what the opponent is doing.
It's true. You have to sit with a lot of cards in hand, and if your opponent is capable of dealing with those cards in some useful fashion, then those cards generally don't get the value that you want out of them. You don't get a lot of card draw here. You just buff your cards and make sure that you have really, really big stuff. Both of these decks have that sort of strategy, and when Grizzly was able to subvert the Ikaria, that was the big turning point in the game.
Yeah, that was definitely the play of the game. The subvert hitting the, 33% hit the Ikaria definitely won the game, because if Marius was able to play that, it's very Grizzly would have had to trade the Umbran Reaper for it, like best case scenario, and then if Marius was able to remove that, then the card just goes unchecked and win this game. So stealing that Ikaria was just such a massive swing.
Subverts are definitely excellent cards against Armory. I'm surprised that Sabotage and Treachery didn't make their way in as well. They seem like a very good card against this sort of hand-focused strategy, but it looks like Grizzly knows what he's doing, and he managed to pick up something really useful as a result. So yeah, should be pretty good. The players are now 1-1, so this game will determine it'll determine the game. So
yeah, the discard spells are interesting because both are good situationally, but you kind of need to pick one. You don't want to dilute your deck too much with this card because it is a bad top deck and the game is likely to go long. So I do like some number of some of them, but I would have to play the matchup more to understand like what I want, what's more important.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, okay, so let's see here. We've got we're waiting to get into this game here, looking at sideboards from the Ikaria blue deck. Oh, what do you think about those sideboards? It's going to be interesting. Like Mistveiled Drake is one of the cards that's going to be in here that's I think sort of useful against the Umbran Reaper plan. Like having a 6/6
Yeah.
Aegis is just
The big
solid.
Aegis flyers like Ikaria and Mistral Drake are actually very good against Grizzly's particular boat of Stone Scar because he doesn't really have a lot to deal with flyers. He has to rely on his removal, and creatures like Mistral Drake and Ikaria with Aegis are much, much more difficult to remove. So I do like Mistral Drake, both giving yourself an Aegis to insulate yourself from Umbra triggers or sabotages or subverts or whatever, and also just presenting this very large threat that is going to be challenging for Grizzly to deal with.
Yeah, one of the star cards for Grizzly, I think, these games has been Cabal Countess. Like, it's been surprisingly difficult for Marius to deal with. There are some answers to it, Vanquish and Harsh Rule in the deck, but for the most part, it tends to actually eat the weapons that it's supposed to, and also get like extra value from forcing trades. That huge amount of damage stacked on like a really tiny amount of health really seems to help out here.
Yeah, just traditionally throughout the history of card games, any threat that you can play on the end of your opponent's turn is powerful against reactive decks because it forces your opponent to do two things. So, for example, like if Marius was to just like pass here and then Grizzly flash the Cabal Countess, then follow up the Cabal Countess with something, that's two threats that Grizzly got to play within one turn cycle where Marius did nothing. So he now has to have two answers for a creature instead of just one.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting stuff. Marius is holding on to an Auric Runehammer for as long as he feels like it. He doesn't torch this champion, which really surprises me. I feel like you do have to worry about like the overall damage that a Stonesguard deck is dealing with you, but this might be the correct decision considering how little late game pressure Grizzly has been able to exert.
Yeah, we see him debating whether he wants to like quarry or statuary maiden. He doesn't gonna go with the quarry. He could have gotten a lot more aggressive there, left up the Cabal Countess, tried to pressure more. But he's gonna play this Argent Instigator that he got off the quarry. The Argent Instigator will meet a torch. So right now, Grizzly doesn't have a huge amount of pressure. It's just the 3/3 Cabal Countess. Champion of Chaos. And he could have been more aggressive this game, but we see that he's kind of content to just hang back.
Yep. Marius playing the Auric Runehammer on a turn where he knows Cabal Countess won't come out. I think this is like really clever play. Just setting up for that Runehammer and then being able to actually put it down and get a second bit of value out of it. Killing a Statuary Maiden, in fact. That's a 2-for-1.
Yeah, this is Auric Runehammer was excellent. It got to kill two creatures, although we see that Grizzly does have the torch, so it's likely just going to trade with the Champion of Chaos and the torch, not the actual Statuary Maiden. But Marius does have the Ikaria, he has a Harsh Rule, he has a Wisdom. He has a lot of tools to win this game. He doesn't need to pull the trigger on the Harsh Rule just yet because he's only facing down 2 power. But if Grizzly extends out further, which he's kind of forced to do because the Statuary Maiden's not really doing enough damage, then the Harsh Rule can come down and he can immediately turn the corner with the Ikaria.
I think we're seeing some strong predictive play from Marius. He's clearly playing around a lot of Grizzly's better threats, and it really just seems like he knows what's in his hand. He's played around Cabal Countess very well. He's setting up for a lot of interesting stuff, and it looks like at this point he's just basically holding out, making sure that he can like just set up and be protected, and generally not worrying as much about his health total as you would with another Stonescar deck.
Yeah, he doesn't decide to play out the Valkyrie there. And I think we'll probably see a chump block here because the Harsh Rule's coming down. Yeah, we do see the Valkyrie jump in front of the 6/1 just to soak up the damage. We'll likely see a Harsh Rule anyway, especially now the second one has been drawn. And he goes definitely backlash up.
It's a really strong play to have the backlash up and be ready to play Ikaria. I think that like if he gets to 9 and plays Ikaria, he's gonna be in just and he's actually going for the Sword of the Sky King here just to gain a little health and get himself into an even stronger position. I think Grizzly's going to have a tough time coming back. There's too many threats from Marius. All of his late game cards are all now in play, and he's still got a Harsh Rule to clear up the board if it gets troublesome.
Yeah, the Furnace Mage is a big deal here for Grizzly dealing with the Sword of the Sky King, but Marius still has his Ikaria, which is going to come down. He actually drew a torch too, so he gets to simultaneously torch this Furnace Mage, although it was already colded by the Ikaria. So yeah, Marius is firm in the driver's seat right now.
Yeah, I'm guessing he's going to avoid torching anything. He's still waiting on that Umbran Reaper, and the Umbran Reaper being torched would be pretty bad. So Marius can now attack for 5 and Harsh Rule if he feels like it. He does have 10 War Cries on the stack this way. Or he can try to stabilize the board a little longer and hold out for those Harsh Rules. I think with 2 Harsh Rules in hand, we'll probably see the Oh, Rise of the Challenge coming out.
And actually, I don't think you get the Mistfell Drake because you know that that's the next thing you're drawing. Yeah, you get Orc Runehammer here and you kill the Infernal Tyrant. So now they still can't attack you. They don't gain life in your Akari as a 2-turn clock. So yeah, this is a great play by Marius. If you really don't want a harsh roll array, you're on Akari. That's how you're winning the game. You know that the Mistfell Drake is the next creature or weapon you are drawing because decks do not get shuffled in Eternal. So he has another threat coming, even if he is forced to pull the trigger. This current threat demands to be dealt with. Marius is just an incredibly good spot.
Yeah, he's still got the torch for the Umbran Reaper, which is very, very strong. Like it will, the Umbran Reaper is still going to deal 5 damage to him and get rid of the Auric Runehammer, so he could use it first on a unit if he wants to. But I don't know if Grizzly's got a lot of good outs here. Akari is just going to continue to beat on him until he plays too much stuff into the harsh rule, and at that point, it's going to be a tricky game.
Yeah, like in Grizzly's side, he's like kind of pressed into playing this Umbran Reaper because he can't let the Akari keep attacking. He's not winning the game that way. But we know that Marius has the torch, so he's just in
and keep in mind that
clamps.
It's a Mistveil Drake on top, right? So
Yes.
5 Warcries on a unit with Aegis. That's really hard for a deck like this to deal with.
And granted, like we don't know how deep that Mistveil Drake is. We just know it's the next creature or weapon. There could be a bunch of power and spells between now and then. So it's possible that Marius breaks off for a while, although that Inspire is a redraw.
Let's make that, is that 15, 16 Warcries on the Celestial Drake?
Yep, and then, he just has lethal with the harsh roll and the, yes.
Game. I wanted to see a big dragon. But we'll close out the game. Very solid play from both players. I think, that was a really exciting game. And I think that Marius definitely did some really interesting things there in terms of ordering his spells and his weapons that basically like put him in a position of significant advantage there. So yeah, really, really cool. I'm glad that Marius won. I think that he definitely deserved that win. And it's just a very good play from both players.
Yeah, and we saw the dynamics of that matchup were pretty much based upon how Grizzly decided to build his deck. He wanted to be a more reactive Stone Scar deck, and he's going to get paid off for that in matchups like Big Combre, I assume, where you can deal with all the like Mystic Ascendants, all that stuff. But in matchups like this, where cards like Death Strike and Suffocate and Annihilate are much worse, and he doesn't have the burn to close of the game, then he's just going to end up in spots like that where he has cards that are dead in his hand or unable to deal with the threats that Marius was presenting.
Yeah, you almost want Flame Blast in the sideboard just so that you have, when you're getting those like early positions of advantage against decks that are even slower than yours, a way to push across and get that final bit of damage. But he did the best he could. I think that it's definitely worked out pretty well. And I think that was a really solid line of play.
Yep. And that was actually our last match of the round. We have no more matches left. So we will be taking a quick break and then rejoining all of you shortly for round 2 of coverage. So for LocoPojo, I am Truedawn, and we will see you guys all shortly for round 2 of the Season 3 Invitational.